Live from the Clarity from Chaos studios, heard worldwide, it's Dave Campbell. On every episode, Dave and his guests explore, discuss, and work on solutions to some of life's biggest challenges. So, if you're ready, be prepared to be enlightened, amused, and even shocked by what you hear. And now, the real, the authentic, the one and only Dave Campbell.
Welcome. I'm your host, Dave Campbell, and you are listening to Clarity from Chaos. Here at Clarity, we work very hard in trying to make sense out of the chaos provided by the corporate media. And on this edition, we welcome back the author of 33 books in his current work, That Day in Dallas, Lee Harvey Oswald Did Not Kill JFK, Mr. Robert Tannenbaum. Robert was appointed deputy counsel in 1976 in charge of the congressional investigation into the assassination of President Kennedy. His book provides stunning and shocking immutable fact that reveals unequivocally that the government reliance on the Warren Commission's investigation and the House Select Committee on Assassination's alleged probe was reprehensibly and ultimately misleading and downright dishonest. In addition, Robert is one of the most successful prosecuting attorneys, having never lost a felony trial. Welcome back, Robert.
Well, it's good to see you. I'm glad we had a chance to get back. And because it's so important just to, field questions from you about all this. In that I don't tell anybody what to think or otherwise, and I don't give my opinions unless they're called for, and I so state that this is an opinion contrary to everything I do in my book. My book is all anecdotal stories of how I develop my value system and how that plays into the manner in which I use the immutable evidence and found it because I had great detectives. The detectives in New York, I must tell you, to show you how influential they are. In the city of L.A., there are 9,000 cops in the entire city of L.A., and that's L.A. County, L.A. City. In New York City, there are 9,000 detectives in NYPD. So
wow.
that's quite a shocker rule because the head of the department when I was there was a man who worked his way up from uniform to detective and then head of the department. And he was so kind. He gave me two detectives to work with, one of whom moved in and lived with my family and worked with me on a daily basis. And the other one grew up in Harlem and lived there all his life with his family. And he had children and so on. Those kids were
right.
Sacrosanct. Believe me, no one was fooling around with them very much. But he looked like Carl Eller from the Vikings back in the day.
Man.
He held my daughter in his hand like so.
Yeah.
Fabulous people. I was blessed with them. And I go out of my way of saying that. And I say the same thing about Richard Sprague from Philadelphia, because Dick is the one who, I didn't know who he was. He was chief assistant DA in Philly. And Arlen Specter became at some point, believe it or not, the DA. Arlen was a big politician guy. So when he ran for DA in Philly, the big Democrat Jewish vote. But then he ran for state senator. So he moved over. He figured I'll get the vote out of Pittsburgh. It's a different kind of vote. But anyway, the work that I have done, when Sprague asked me in March of 76 to work with him, he was just appointed chief counsel to the House Select Committee on Assassinations in the middle of 76. And we were going to start, and we did start in January of 77. So because it was a House Select Committee, it didn't have funding. And that's why the select committees are different from the standing committees. Standing committees have constant funding going on. And the select committee has a 2-year life. So Dick had called me. I asked him why he would recommend me. I'm flattered because as soon as I got the call from him, I checked him out to talk around the office, in the DA's office at the time. I was in the DA's office for 10 years after law school. He's a perfect match for you. I said, why? Because he'll work 18 hours a day and no one will know where the hell he is. And, somehow miraculously you get to the right answer. We're not sure who you're talking to and you're not telling us. I said, well, that's very good. Let's keep it that way. So it did work in that regard. We did go to Washington together. And a very strange thing happened in Washington. I was contacted by Richard Schweiker, Senator Richard Schweiker from Pennsylvania. And Schweiker had just completed an investigation on what was the Senate Church Committee on the Article 2, the executive branch's response to the assassinations. And those assassinations, of course, were just nightmarish. And the assassinations were, President Kennedy and Martin Luther King. We're talking about some of the greatest Americans. And then and we were big Bobby Kennedy fans. We were at the last affair that he had at Berkeley, because that's where I was at law school at the time, college and law school at Cal. And he had a major address which he gave. It was the last one publicly he ever gave. It was the end of May of 77, 78, whatever the hell it was. Yeah, 78. It was near the end of that. But anyway, the point is that early the next few mornings, my wife is shaking me, saying, "You got to get up. You have to wake up." I was taking the New York bar then, and the California bar. The California bar then was given in summer, in July. The New York bar was given in August. So I opted to take both, which I did. She said, wake up. And I'm, in what I call one of those great sleep moments.
Yeah.
And I said, "What's the matter?" And you know how a loved one's voice is in panic. I
Yeah.
said, "What's the matter?" She said, "They just killed Bobby." And this was in 68. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was 68, 78. Yeah, it was during the life of the committee. And it was heartbreaking, to say the least. We had a very close affection for Bobby Kennedy, as we did for JFK, obviously. And I'm still confounded by some of the idiots who insist on calling me to get me to admit that both sides are evil. Can't get off that. And I shouldn't let it bother me, but it does, because if someone confronts me with an idiot comment like that, I don't let it go. I say, okay, if that's what you believe and makes you happy, here's your box lunch, go away, sit on the bench for a couple hours.
Right.
So what happened was I get a telephone call from Richard Schweiker, Senator Richard Schweiker. By the way, Schweiker was a middle of the road, what we call basically more right of left, a very quiet, calm guy. He wasn't looking for a newsworthy opportunity to have we do today.
Yeah. He wasn't looking for a soundbite. No.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, exactly.
So he said to me, "I have two things I want to inform you of, and I have material for you." Now, Sprague and I made it very clear to the committee that if they played politics with the committee in any way, we would resign immediately. We were advised about that potential by a lot of good people.
Yeah.
That they'll try and stymie you, they'll only allocate X amount of time, that you'll have people who will take over all of a sudden the questioning from the other side and say, not give you a chance to respond. I saw that today with Bobby Kennedy Jr. This character, this Democrat senator from, I think it's Virginia. He's saying, "I can't believe how stupid you are." He's saying this to Bobby Kennedy Jr. I mean, to put yourself into that position and not respond is not something I really would ever do. Believe me when I tell you that. And it's not a question of raising one's voice or anything else. It's a question of common sense about what we've been talking about the issue of Marxism. I mean, for me to tell you that Democrats believe that it's a good thing for them to be Marxist, to me, as we used to say in Brooklyn, in Yiddish, that's a shanda. That's what it is. It's a real shanda. It's a shame. But that's what this is. It's degenerated into this kind of situation. So anyway, back to Schweiker. He said to me, and Dick Sprague and I said, "We have no brief here. We're not coming in here with anyone else's opinion." And by the way, if it turns out that from the immutable evidence, assuming we get our hands on it, we're not going to say that's what we're going to do, period. We're going to do whatever the evidence tells us to do. The evidence is going to lead us through this. So Schweiker calls me and asks me if I would visit him. And I said, of course. And he says, "Look, the first thing I want to tell you is I just finished being the senator of the church committee in evaluating the assassination of various executive committee people, and we have come to the following conclusions. He says, "May I continue?" I'm in his office. I said, "Sure." Now, I have just spent 10 years in the DA's office in Manhattan, legendary DA Frank Hogan, and always had liberal, conservative, Republicans, Democrat support for. He was DA in 42, and then he stayed as DA until 74.
Wow.
And amazing person. He never wavered on his commitment. That's why I urge people to read That Day in Dallas and Echoes of My Soul, which is my other nonfiction book. And there were 3 others, but I don't want to overwhelm anyone. But if you want to know why I selected Hogan to work for, it was because of the fact that he never wavered. And he had a very brutal case where they locked up the wrong guy.
Oh.
In a totally brutal case. Double murder, rape in a fashionable Upper East Side apartment in Manhattan. And it happened in 63 in August. And the window was open of the kitchen, and the killer climbed in through the service stairway and jumped into the apartment, raped and murdered the 2 girls. And he said to me that the CIA will be obstructionists. They will not participate in a friendly manner. They will do everything they can to stymie you and disappoint you, particularly from your background, he said. And it'll be very frustrating. I want you to be prepared for that. That's what happened with us. After all, he said, I was just chairman of the subcommittee. You're going into a different issue. That is to say, same investigation. And he said, I also want to tell you the following, and it breaks my heart. But from our investigation, we believe that members of the Central Intelligence Agency participated in the assassination of President Kennedy. I mean, I have to be candid with you. Whenever I say that, chills go up and down my body. I still find it hard to believe. Because people say to me all the time, why are you doing this? It's 62 years. I said, it's 62 years that the government has lied to us, not on my opinion, on the immutable evidence and facts. I said, is there a greater case that we need to be concerned about other than who murdered the president at Dealey Plaza at 12:30 in the afternoon? We know who killed Lincoln. Not that we get medals for any of this stuff. We don't know who murdered the president. And if anybody wants to know the evidence, read That Day in Dallas. Oswald did not do it. And the reason I got involved was the worst thing you can do as a prosecutor, in my judgment, is to arrest and prosecute an innocent person. That's not, if you want to use a common lingo, who we are. There are enough cases I have had in the grand jury where I dismissed the cases in the grand jury. As the grand jury is dismissed them based upon my recommendation of a lack of evidence, or basically upon exculpatory evidence. There's serious exculpatory evidence here with Lee Harvey Oswald. And I don't believe as a result of that exculpatory evidence, he could ever be convicted in an honest courtroom in America. Proceeding on, what happened then was another phenomenon. He told me that as a result of the Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba, when I say Bay of Pigs, I don't know if people think I'm calling it by a derogatory name. That's the name. No. I didn't make it up, but that's what it's called. And that Ike and the vice president had a meeting in 59 about what they would do about this whole issue. JFK was so affronted and livid about the lack of information, honesty that he believed he received from Allen Dulles, who was then head of the CIA. His brother's John Foster Dulles, Secretary of State. So this was no insignificant brother team here. And they enraged Kennedy. And so JFK fired Allen Dulles. And he put in a lawyer who was a very, very devoted JFK person. I say that for a reason right now. And his name was John McCone, M-C-C-O-N-E, John McCone. At this particular time in American history, members of our government who held high positions, like James Raleigh, head of the Secret Service, John McCone now headed the CIA from 61. They didn't trust the American people with handling the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald was a contract employee starting in 57 of the CIA and the FBI. Yeah, I'll give you a quick 2-sentence worth of it here in the book, so you know what I'm talking about. And it appears at page 109. John Angleton, counterintelligence czar, ran Lee Harvey Oswald as a fake defector to the Soviet Union in 1959. Lee Harvey Oswald had been a CIA asset since 57 at the time of this recruitment into Angleton's operation. Oswald was a radar operator working with CIA's top secret Lockheed U-2 air base in Atsugi, Japan. Oswald, the U.S. Marine, had been stationed in Atsugi since 57, tracking CIA spy flights over the Soviet Union and China. And that being a highly compartmentalized unit, the CIA Counter-Intel Unit was responsible to Angleton and only to Angleton. On he goes, but I'm not going to belabor that point for you. But the people in charge were trying to protect the greater good because the American people were too dumb to handle the truth.
Yep.
And so McCone got a letter from the chief Rawley of the Secret Service. And Rawley said, you know, the leaks that are going on about Lee Harvey Oswald's training and suspect activity are concerned because if it was in any way disclosed to the wrong persons, we know who that means with the media. I mean, the media rather. That the wrong persons, it would lead the media to erroneously claim that this agency, the CIA, and perhaps others were directly involved in the Dallas action. The Dallas action is how they refer to the assassination. It's a 2-page letter. The third page is strictly signature. And on page 2, at paragraph top of the letter, top of McCone's response was, while the persons involved in the employ of this agency, the CIA, as well as the FBI, as much as these persons were involved in the employ, while the persons involved in the assassination were in the employ of this agency as well as the FBI, he closes it off by saying it's impossible to maintain 24-hour-a-day responsibility over its operatives. Now, when I got this confession letter, the first things I did were to make sure it was honest, to make sure it was authentic. And I went back to the people who originally got it. They were in the 78 archives of the House Select Committee on Assassinations. And Dick Russell, who was an excellent researcher. And look, there were quasi-Meshuggah researchers, and there are some very, very good people who have done this for a long time. Dick Russell is one of them. And in 91, he wrote a book, The Man Who Knew Too Much. And he mentioned the letter. He had the letter in there. And the reason I mention this aspect of it is I told Lou Stokes, who was the chairman of our committee, that he was thanking me for all the work I did, blah, blah, blah. I said, I didn't do anything. It's out there. That's why I just mentioned the 78 letter that was in the file, the manner in which it was in the file with numbers and consistent with being a document. And then, of course, McCone's letter of a total confession, which there was a March 3rd, 64 confession in this, what I call letter. It could be a document, call it what you wish. Raleigh, and then I got my hands on, and consistent with this, a December 12/22/63 memo from President Truman, who said he was very, very, very saddened that he permitted the Office of Strategic Services to morph into the CIA. And he says, because they became operational, they have their own foreign policy, basically, and there's no oversight here. And this whole thing with oversight, to show you the lack of oversight, and I always have a little note here for Mr. Schumer, Senator Schumer from Brooklyn. Here is a guy who was the majority leader in the Senate, and he was in charge of oversight of Article 2 of the Constitution, the executive. And he said when it was Trump, first term, when he was taking on the executive intelligence agencies, taking them on, questioning, what are you guys doing? What do you do with the money you get, and so on and so forth? Anything in my judgment should be done, obviously, with respect to what goes on. And he said that there have been some embarrassing situations with respect to the operational nature of what is going on with the government pursuant to the CIA, which I found very interesting about how people were concerned about this. But leave it to our government. They did themselves one better. And the one better was the following. They created what they said was the neutron activation analysis testing. Well, we know from science that neutron analysis questioning, NAA, neutron activation component, was the testing, the principal testing component for comparative bullet-lead analysis. Now, what does that mean, this mumbo jumbo? NAA, neutron activation analysis, was what the government went around saying, this is the science now. This is pure science. So if there are people around the country who are questioning our credibility, this is exactly what he was saying. Then you believe that the earth was flat. You're a dummy. This is exactly what they were saying from the government, supporting NAA. Well, what is NAA really? It's an opportunity. It turns out to be worthless. But at the time, some people believed this. It was an opportunity to say, if we can match a fragment to a fragment. We can match a fragment to a full bullet. Now, why is that important? Because the government was arguing, don't you get it? There were two large fragments in the limo. That's one bullet. Next, there was another bullet. No, so little fragments were taken out of Connolly's wrist and matched CE 399, a magic bullet. Unscathed, of course, by all the evidence I have in the book. Unscathed. It was totally deformed when it hit the wrist of the cadaver. They did experiments on it. The government did. They also never answered the question, how was it? How was it possible for your case to have any credibility? That is 3 shots from the back, 1 shot at Kennedy in the head, and his head went forward. Now, the truth is, his head went forward, but at the time he was dead. And that's what's so important, is to watch Kennedy's head, not body. His head guides the body. And so what happened was, there were 3 shots in the first flurry of events. Kennedy and Connolly were hit in the back with a downward trajectory. Kennedy was hit 5-6 inches below the line and a downward track. So when you get to the one bullet theory, which was ordered by none other than the man who became the head of Arlen Specter, who became head of this whole show. And oddly enough, Dick Sprague worked for Arlen Specter when he was a DA. It's a small world story there. But Specter never tried a case. He did was exactly what you would do if you were a total political animal. Get a hold of a Sprague, let him do everything, and I'll go out there and, become a United States Senator kind of thing. So what happened was, NAA became a reporting issue for the media. What is NAA? Well, the government has the only lab that does the testing called NAA, the scientific event. How do we know that it was totally a fraud, invalid, which is what they say now. They didn't say this at the time. They had FBI agents going into court testifying under oath that NAA is legit. They got a lot of lawyers out there that should be on top of this. But the lab was the only lab that existed was here in America, in Washington. September 1st, 05, the lab was shut down. Why? Nobody in our government thought it is essential to speak to the metallurgical PhDs, all of whom were reading these articles saying this is nonsense. NAA is invalid. And then they went public. And when they went public, the CIA and the rest of them asked for the government, the FBI, have the government retain 10 of the best metallurgical people. And they did that. They also did testing on firing cadavers. And they gelatinized skulls. They gelatinized 10 skulls. And from the same height, distance in the book depository, all the stuff you want to do. They fired these rifles, the Manuka Corcanos, into the back of the heads. All the heads went forward, of course. The only head they claim ever went backwards was the 4th shot. And that shot caused a boom blast. That is, if we were on the bridge overlooking the motorcade, the limo coming towards us.
Right. Which the Zapruder film, if you watch it, right at the end, his head snaps back.
Exactly. Exactly, because what happens is, right at the end, in the fourth shot, his head is blown out in the back. We know that from Bobby Hargis, who's the motorcade cop. We know it from, what's that, Clint Hill, who just passed away. He jumped that car, he looked in there, saw his cerebellum. So, this was powerful stuff. And again, the committee never bothered to call anybody from who was involved in any way.
Well, they had a lot of witnesses on the bridge
They have a lot of because
yeah.
I'll give an example. Dr. Kemp Clark was chief of neurosurgery. He was in trauma room 1. Why wasn't he called as a witness? He observed a gaping hole in the back of the president's head.
Right. Yep.
And that gaping hole, he saw the cerebellum, he said. And then you have Dr. Robbie McClellan. He drafted a vivid diagram that everybody looks at. The back of his head is out in the diagram, the back of the president's head. And then we have the following, which I find fascinating, and that is that people always ask, how many shots in total? Not an easy question to answer to the extent I limited it to that which we can prove. But there are more, and here's what I mean. Dr. Robert Shaw did an examination on Connolly's thoracic. He was Connolly's thoracic surgeon, and he did an examination of that wound. This is the wound to Connolly, to Connolly's thoracic area. He also has a fragment expert come in and examine him as well. But this is fascinating. Robert Shaw says, as he's dictating into his phone, as the doctors do when they're doing autopsies, etc., and they do it because they don't want to lose the flow of continuity. And that flow of continuity is, if I'm involved in this investigation, if I leave and have to go somewhere, you can pick up my recording and pick it up right away. And so Robert Shaw said that there was a declination of a downward track in and out bullet wound that hit Kennedy and Connolly. And it came in at a 27-degree declination. He had no idea how important it was what he just said. This was 1 or 2 hours after the assassination. What is the significance of the 27 degrees? People were smart enough to take a good look at that 27 degrees, and here's what they found out. Elm Street, I'm sure. You're an expert on Elm Street. The fact that the car makes the left-hand turn onto Elm and goes west, the limo.
Right. Which it wasn't supposed to do.
That's another whole issue. Try to stay with the major issues here. You can be here forever.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry.
But anyway, we have the 23-degree declination. Now get this, you'll love this. From the rooftop of the county records building, with a direct shot over the roof onto Elm. No shrubbery, no trees, no angles. The 27-degree declination from the rooftop of the county records building in the northeast corner of Elm Street, directly to the rear of the president limo, to the point of entry into Connolly's back, was 27 degrees. Now that, I'm not here, making people wish believers at all. I am saying those are facts. In front of the area where we have, in large measure, part of all of that, which makes it almost laughable, is our inspector being directed. Once Alan Dulles was fired by JFK because of the Bay of Pigs, here we go. Our inspector was told, you come up with a one-bullet theory. He was told that by Alan Dulles. So, inspector came up with a one-bullet theory. The only problem is, in history, it will make him to be the biggest jerk who ever listened to other people, because, in fact, and I'll give you this one very quickly, you got to be careful what you do when you're involved in these investigations. Got to be very careful, because you're not there to try to make a point. You want to get everything you can. So the one-bullet theory turns out to the following. And the Magical Carcano. It all has a closure. And in December of '63, the Secret Service and the FBI found that Connolly and JFK were struck by 2 separate bullets, and both were shot within 1.9 seconds of each other. What's the problem? Here's the problem. You can't fire the Magical Carcano in less than 2.3 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
And the whole film is 18.3 seconds. So now what do? Well, we say, come up with the one bullet theory. So we comes up with a one bullet theory. Well, the problem with the one bullet theory, they said, was the back wound to JFK was 5 to 6 inches below the neckline. Now, this bullet has to come out his throat to have any evidentiary significance if you believe in the one bullet theory. So how does it get up here? It's down here on a downward track. Experts came in and said it moved upward 11 degrees and out his throat, and then hit Connolly in the right shoulder, hit him in the leg, and fractured his wrist, his axial nerve, severed the tendon between the right thumb and the right index finger. When you see that experiment done by the government, it has cotton wadding are the first 2 shots they use. Well, there's no deformity in the bullet, the cotton wadding. And then there's a shot that hits the rib. This is all done. It's all in the book. I have an outline for everybody. And they then look at the rib, and there is some deformity. But then it hits the axial nerve of the cadaver, and enormous, enormous deformity. Again, all of this evidence is right here in the book. So all that I'm saying here is that Spector, for his entire life, although he thinks I was about to say colloquialism, but I won't.
I was thinking the same thing, Robert.
Spector throughout his life, and how lucky he was to have come up with the one bullet theory. It's amazing how the bullet, this is the only bullet that when it goes into the body of the downward track, actually came up 11 degrees.
Came back up? Yeah, it came back up and then back out and back down again.
This is amazing what we found out. And then we have this issue of minute metallic fragments I want to mention quickly because it's a dynamite piece of evidence. Minute metallic fragments are, if I was sitting here now where I am, and someone shot me from the back of my head, I would not have minute metallic fragments in the front of my head. They're formed by a dust. And because JFK was hit above the ear and he was shot above the right ear and he lost the back of his head. And that's in the autopsy. You see it in the autopsy. The markings of where he gets shot and the downward track. Yes, I do wonder how anyone can say these things and be serious. Why didn't they do what we did? We accepted all the good work that was done and gave credit to them. We weren't in this thing for credit. So all of that happening, we then go to what happened at Dealey Plaza, assuming I could find my note. And here we are. And at Dealey Plaza, this is where I told you that I mentioned I mentioned the Lou Stokes thing to you. Did I not already?
Yes.
Good. I mentioned that because I've done some other interviews and I don't want to leave anything out for you. I'm trying to figure in my head, did I cover everything for you,
You're doing great. Yeah.
So anyway, at Dealey Plaza, the following occurred. There was a police officer who was outside the book depository, and his name was Joe Marshall Smith, I think. And a woman said to him, they're shooting at the grassy area over those trees, those bushes. He runs over there and pulls out his service revolver, and there's a guy walking away. There are a couple of cars parked there. I have all that, the cars, and you see the whole thing. And he says, stop. Guy stops, and he shows his Secret Service identification. All of the Secret Service in Dealey Plaza was in the motorcade. He actually had one of the killers right there. So the Dealey Plaza thing is that there were moms and dads who had children who were there in the grassy area in what I call the stockade fence area. Because the great people in the government, they like to belittle things. So they can call it the grassy knoll. When's the last person you saw at the grassy knoll? Who was it? The good human man? Ha, ha, ha.
Right.
The women, the men and the women, the dads and moms covered up their child because shots, they're in the line of fire, they said, over their head. Now, I didn't include those in the 5. There are too many. I mean, where do I begin with that? And Spring agreed with me, of course. We had a 46-year friendship as a result of the meeting on this case. And that's the kind of person he was. We went around the country trying cases. But he was a very, very, very dear friend, a very, very, very generous person with a big heart, but a tremendous intellect and understood what it takes. And here's the kicker. what it takes to try these cases, in my judgment, as well as his, the DA has a tremendous advantage. Don't let anybody kid you. But you have to prepare. And that takes a lot of time. Because as I have here, various exculpatory evidence, Oswald allegedly had someone he was having a Coke with, a drink with, and they heard the shots together. Now, maybe this all made up. I'm not saying this is the gospel, but you have to hand that over at the earliest possible opportunity to the defense and let them run with it. And they will run with it. And if they don't run with that, they'll run with something else. Who knows? But they're runners all over the place. Trust me. And you've got to be super prepared to handle all this stuff. And that takes a tremendous, tremendous burden. And that's why when I was in the DA's office in charge of the Homicide Bureau and the criminal courts, get this, every day in the criminal courts, we took in 250 cases. 150 in the morning from 8 in the morning until 5 at night. And then from 7 at night till the early morning, we took in 100. So it was on the average, 250 cases, from spitting on the sidewalk to murder. It was my job to try and get evaluations that were meaningful, because DAs left to plea bargaining. Why? You don't have to try the case. Defendant comes in and okay, tell everybody in the world you're guilty. Raise your right hand, and then you can wait another month before you come back in to try another case. And that's what galled me when I was running the office. In essence, no one pulled that stuff on me. I mean, they tried to, and I disabused them of doing that again, because we need qualitative dispositions. And that means we don't try every case. Can't do it, obviously. There's so many cases.
Right.
There aren't enough courts. There aren't enough people
right.
who are in the business. But you want to get the very best out of those who are in the business. And that's why I always felt, if a kid lost a case, I said, tell me, sit down, relax. Tell me your preparation. Why you did it? Why weren't you prepared for this? On and on and on. So, yeah, from my point of view, every minute I spent doing that was invaluable, because I cared greatly about doing the right thing in the job I had. If I didn't like it, I'd do another job. And what really galls me, I will tell you this, is the notion that people say all the time who are in law enforcement, like, the people say, and rightfully so to a certain extent, you're in the FBI. You knew, so the question goes, you knew that there was corruption in the FBI from the highest level. Remember the woman and the man, they're in love with each other, probably at the beach in Brooklyn. Who knows where they were. But the point is that we cannot permit the system to be degenerated. And if in fact we do that, then we lost the system in its entirety. You just can't go back. And that's why the Hogan experience was so important, because did I tell you about the House Select Committee on page 37?
No.
Here's what happened. Here's what happened. People ask me all the time, wasn't this, wasn't all this really something that they just made a mistake about? And my answer to that is no. This is not something they just made a mistake about at all, because it's an intentional contrivance. And why I say that is the following. At page 37 of the Forensic Medical Panel report of August 78, remember, this is the House Committee. It has a 2-year life. It started in 77, and now it was the end of August, and they come up with their reports. That's what they thought they were entitled to do. They didn't investigate anything. How could they? The guy in charge never investigated a case in his life, a murder case. Yeah. Never tried a murder case in his life. This guy's in charge now. So why be picayune here with me? The Forensic Medical Panel report I get my hands on, it says the following. This is from the committee. Quote, the Parkland doctors must be mistaken as my predecessor. This guy who's never tried anything. The Parkland doctors must be mistaken because the evulsive head wound that it has been alleged to the president was not seen during the autopsy by the 26 witnesses at Bethesda. Not shocking. This is a major head injury here. I use the word evulsive. I mean, how much more descriptive can we get? But then I do the digging to get out the documents. Here's what they said. I'm going to repeat it very quickly. A gratuitous throwaway comment. Parkland doctors must have been mistaken regarding the evasive head wound, because all of the 26 witnesses at Bethesda during the autopsy did not see the head injury. I get the exact reports. Here's the truth. At Bethesda, all of the witnesses not only saw the gaping hole, but they gave testimony to the committee they saw the gaping hole. This, again, is like you look up, you look heavenly. I think I could take over now. That's the nature of this evidence. So when we're talking about what the evidence is and how it, rung true, as a matter of fact, the issue you raised, I had a note on where I have it in front of me. And it was that it dealt with the fifth shot. No one knew about the fifth shot except, as it turned out, my compatriot who was with me on the whole issues of McClellan and all that transpired there. And then, of course, the Lou Stokes stuff about, I'll get to that in a second. But what happened at Dealey Plaza was this boom blast that caused everybody to look to their left who were looking at the roadway on Elm as a limo coming towards them. The boom blast came from the right Knoll Hill stockade fence. This is important. An area close proximity to where Zapruder was filming. So if you see Zapruder, what he's doing, he's talking, and then he moves towards the Knoll area, the fence area.
Yep.
So he knows the shots are coming from there.
Well, I think Robert, even in the clips of the film, you see the people ducking on the grassy knoll in regarding to hearing the shot.
That's exactly right. But
yeah.
What I wrote down here, those shots to his head, and JFK's head violently snaps back.
Yeah. That's
the fourth shot. One should not confuse that with any other shot, particularly the fifth shot, which no one knew about. The only reason, and what I wrote down here was that fourth shot left him immobile, vitally depressed, and slumped dead in his wife's right shoulder. But then there were these fragments. So where are they coming into this thing? And here's where they're coming in. The fragments were that there was damage done to the rear view, to the damage to the interior limo windshield, just as we have in frame 313. That's the frame that we see the fourth shot, JFK's head being blown out. And then at frame 328, again, it's 18.3 frames per second. At frame 313 is a shot to the head. Frame 328, we know that the JFK wound was enlarged at 313. You can actually see his flip. There's a flap that comes over. And there was a damage to the interior of the limo windshield. It also struck Connolly. Now, that's why Connolly holding that Stetson hat upside down, put it on, this way, is important. It's like, why are we following the Stetson hat? Because throughout all of this shooting, he never let go of that hat. And why is that important? Because of the fragment nature of what was happening. No one knew about the fifth shot. And that was a big thing for us to have come out with. At the time, we came out with it. And that, that was Bob Groden and I, who I mentioned, who was an expert hired. And that shot, interestingly, the fifth shot comes 7/10 of a second after the fourth shot. That's how much of time it is. And that's where you go to frame 328. All of what I mentioned to you was, and I can almost say I'm going to close on what Lou Stokes told me. Did I tell you what Lou Stokes said to me in a caution? What Lou said to me was, he's the chairman of the committee from Cleveland. He's a major defense attorney. So we were a great combo. I'm the DA. He's a defense attorney. We got along famously as pros, but we had some good heated conversation. But I said to Lou, I have information here. I'm going to try to get some subpoenas, because it turns out that the CIA has documents there. I'm so informed. I haven't seen them yet, but I want to see them, obviously. And I want to know whether or not the CIA operation was a rogue operation of the assassination, or it was
planned,
part of a policy one. He said, Bob, the senior members of this committee are not going to help you. I said, really? I said, why'd you hire us? They did not take me seriously and Sprague seriously, that if you interfered with the investigation, we would resign. He said, nobody thought you would do it as fast and as thorough as you did it. I said, well, that's very heartwarming. Very heartwarming. I said, well, why? Everything I have told you, Lou, is what Sprague and I found out after every day at night. I would call you up and tell you where we were. And he said, I know, I want to thank you for that, but they're not about to sign any subpoenas for this. So I just leaned forward in my club chair in his office, and I said, to say I'm disappointed is to put it mildly, but if all of the evidence was out there, that I'm telling you was out there, I'm not taking any credit for this. And this gets us into the authenticity I did on the bottom line of how of how we knew what was happening with respect to the problem area, because the problem area is you can't use the Magnico Carcano because it takes 2.3 seconds to fire, and yet they were hit at 1.9 seconds. So much for that. Now you got the real murder weapon. So
yeah,
I said, I'm very concerned about this because I don't want people to go off half-cocked around this thing. And so Groden and I had this major coming about. I said, so why aren't more people coming about? And he said, they're afraid of retaliation. I said, retaliation? From who? He said, the CIA. Don't you get it?
Well,
Get it
yeah,
now.
I mean, Robert, you sit there and you fold around all the crap that they pulled on Russiagate with Brennan and Clapper and all of this stuff. The comments that they made when Trump had his first term, that you don't mess with the CIA, all of that. And then I started going through a lot of the released documents that were supposedly released around the JFK assassination. None of it's going to lead to anything. It's all kabuki theater, every bit of it. Because to your point, everybody's afraid of somebody waking up in the middle of the night to see somebody with their head covered with a black mask and a silenced .22, and that'll be the last thing they see. That's what they're worried about.
Well, that's, pretty much covers what I wanted to talk to you about. Again, I can't thank you enough for giving me the chance to talk about what this evidence is and the outrageousness of what the government is doing. Saying NAA, if you don't believe in NAA, you're a dope, and so on. You believe the earth is flat. They went on and on and on. So anyway, I thank you for this opportunity, believe me.
It's been a pleasure. Where can people find the book? Obviously, I would say Amazon.
Well, you can find it at Barnes & Noble, at Amazon. The best place to find it is Amazon, and then you can write your own review.
There you
go.
go.
Publish it. So,
yeah. We've been talking to...
everyone.
You bet. We've been talking to Robert Tannenbaum, who's written the book That Day in Dallas. Lee Harvey Oswald did not kill JFK. And it's been such a pleasure talking to you and understanding and listening to the events that you put your heart and soul into. And unfortunately, it didn't go anywhere because of fear of, to your point, retribution. So.
Well, I want you to know what I did with Lou Stokes was, he said, what are you going to do now? I'm in his office, as I told you what happened there. I said, Lou, I'm resigning effective now. Now, I haven't spoken to Sprague, but I'm going to meet with him in an hour. I said, does this apply to Sprague also? You want him to resign? Yes. You're a team. I said, thank you very much. That's probably the smartest thing you've ever said in that chair. And so that's how it all ended. And I didn't hesitate. Why did Sprague hesitate for a second? We're not built for going through an investigation that's a fraud. We would never do that. It's just crazy. But I do thank you for your search for truth. Don't give up.
No, I won't. And as I said, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to some more conversation with you. It's always fun.
I'm honored.
It's always fun, sir. Take care.
God bless you.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to listen to more Clarity from Chaos shows on demand, go to clarityfromchaos.buzzsprout.com or send Dave an email at info@clarityfromchaos.com for information on previous shows. You can also listen to the show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Twitter, or Google Podcast. Until next time, please remember, it's not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Be well, everyone.